Hello and welcome to the Groupthink Podcast. In this episode, we're going to begin the first of a series of discussions I'm going to be doing with members of the nascent conservative film blogosphere, and that is Ethan Collins. Ethan is a regular Twitter troll that I interact with. He writes for I believe the ED blog. What else am I missing?
Yeah, so I write for the Ed blog. We call it Ed Music, Movies, Etc. That's I run that with a good friend of mine, David Malone, and I do tweet a lot, as you mentioned, and I write more. Yeah, and I write more briefly and more often, actually, about movies on Letterboxd and about music on a website called listened.com, Listnd. It's kind of a site trying to become the letterbox for music, for albums and things like that.
Sure. I mean, when I first found your blog when we started kind of going back and forth on Twitter, and initially my first response was I couldn't figure out how the title was pronounced. I'm like,
yeah.
Okay, the ED.
Yeah.
I don't know why they've decided to give their name an acronym that stands for erectile dysfunction, but I'm...
Yeah, that was kind of a joke. Yeah, that was definitely a purposeful joke. Yeah, David Malone and I are good friends going several years back, and his name is David and my name is Ethan. So we were like, well, as just being funny, we could call it the Ed Music, Movies, Etc. or the Ed blog. So yeah, we usually call it the Ed blog when we mention it, when we're talking about it, but you can call it ED if you want to. Hopefully that's not too accurate.
I can't confirm nor deny that, but in all seriousness, I will say it is a very good blog. There's a lot of eclectic but interesting stuff, which is what I expect out of a good film critic. So
yeah, I don't get to write on it as much as I want to, but I try to keep up with it as much as I can.
Yeah, and part of the reason I wanted to have you on specifically was because somehow your and I opinions line up almost exactly, which is
it's true.
Exceptionally weird, especially nowadays. I mean, we even agree on The Last Jedi, which is like I cannot believe I actually found like someone else that has like the same opinions on it as I do, because nowadays in our sphere of existence, there's so many like black pill types that are just like, Hollywood either exists to make money or Hollywood exists to do nothing but brainwash me, and I'm just like, I like going to the movies, guys. How about you?
Yeah.
And I'm like,
the movies are great. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we do actually have a lot of similar opinions on a lot of different things, I noticed, especially when it comes to films. Yeah, The Last Jedi, for our kind of circle among conservative / libertarian / classical liberal film commentators and critics and reviewers, a lot of them hate The Last Jedi. And, I mean, that is what it is.
Especially our previous lovely guest, Jacob from Daily Wire, who's...
Yes.
He's coined the name Ruin Johnson, which...
Yeah.
I mean, maybe this would be a good kind of topic. Have you been hearing about, this would be a good, transition. Have you been hearing all the stuff about Knives Out that's been going on?
Yeah, I wrote down a few things that I would talk to you about, if possible. I mean, you're the interviewer, so you can steer it, obviously. But
I wouldn't consider this an interview as much as it is just a chat. So
hey, that sounds great.
I mean, I made the same mistake I made when I had Kyle Mann on, when I didn't prepare anything for today. So feel free to drive the conversation.
Okay, yeah. I mean, Knives Out. So when I watched The Last Jedi, I went to it with a lot of a kind of a different point of view than a lot of people who went to it. I like Star Wars, but I didn't really get into Star Wars as much until later in life. Actually, I didn't watch it as a kid. I wasn't watching the prequels when they first came out. I loved. I've been a lover of film ever since I was a little kid, and I always loved the old movies and all the posters and everything associated with them. But I went into The Last Jedi more excited because it was Rian Johnson, actually. And I don't know if I've ever talked to anybody that was that excited about it being Rian Johnson. Most people didn't even know who he was. But because of Looper and Brick, and lesser so for the Brother Bloom, isn't it the Brothers Bloom?
Yeah, I honestly, of all of the things I've seen of his, I've only gotten halfway through that one. But
yeah, and he directed 2 excellent episodes of Breaking Bad. which is one of my favorite shows of all time. So I went into The Last Jedi kind of expecting it to be kind of what it turned out to be. I mean, it is a messy movie. It's not a perfect movie by any means. No movie is perfect, obviously. It is very messy and flawed, but he, like in a lot of his movies, he was kind of trying to play around with several different kinds of classic film tropes. And it seemed like that was what he was most interested in, was playing around with film tropes and film visuals and images and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, when I go back and, like, if you read all of his backlog of, like, articles and stuff online, like, the number one thing I get a sense of with the guy is that he's a massive, like, classics nerd. Like,
yes.
He has his own list at Criterion Collection.
Yes.
Film Crit Hulk has a good article about him where he talks about him, and he's like, the guy is just, like, so knowledgeable about classic film, and, like, that's kind of, like, my positive emotions towards him is that I kind of get where he's coming from as an artist.
Me too.
Although Knives Out seems to be kind of provocative, and I'm not exactly sure what his purpose in doing that is beyond.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No. I was just gonna say I'm not sure yet. I haven't really read any reviews on it. I've just seen a few people's comments. Have there been any actual reviews out yet about it?
I submitted a piece to Legal Insurrection about this. I have been looking through a lot of reviews on it, and they're universally positive. I haven't read a bad review for it yet, so it sounds like it's going to be a very good movie. But the number one thing that they keep saying in their review is there's a lot of really topical politics stuff in it. They outright reference MAGA stuff at one point.
No.
They said that some of the characters kind of have like the white liberal thing from Get Out.
Yeah.
I don't remember everything, but it sounds like it's not even necessarily subtext as much as it is like text. Like it's like
that's
immediate.
Too bad, yeah.
Which, if that's the case, and he's really going that far out of his way to throw in like jabs at the right or at people who doesn't like his previous movies, he's essentially setting himself up as the filmmaker du jour of the progressive left, which that could make him much more of a hot commodity than before. I thought this movie was going to be the one that kind of like settled him in and gave him a chance to like kind of win people back. Nope, he's just doubling down.
Yeah, I guess I did listen to the entire podcast you had with Jacob Berry, and he did something that I've never heard anybody do, and that was tie Rian Johnson and Zack Snyder together. And so I was going to say that Rian Johnson could be the left's Zack Snyder.
Oh, gosh. Well, Zack Snyder is going to come back in a few years and direct The Fountainhead, so just wait for that.
Yeah, I saw a lot of the comments, mostly on Twitter, mostly on social media, talking about Knives Out, saying that there are references to Trump-style things. And I guess I'll reserve my judgment until the movie comes out, but it does sound like what you're saying, that it will be text, not just subtext. And I don't really know what to think about that until I see the movie. I mean, you know, I'm not against people jabbing at Trump, but especially when you're jabbing at the people who support him, it almost shows more of a lack of understanding.
Yeah, there's more of a level of contempt to that than...
Yeah, contempt.
It's different than it would just be if it was like going after the guy, although there's not that much great anti-Trump humor at the moment.
That's true. Unfortunately, the thing is that with all of the anti-Trump humor, I mean, I'm not necessarily the biggest Trump fan. I mean, if you look on my Twitter, you're not going to see me posting MAGA stuff and Trump stuff. But, you know, I am more conservative, more classical liberal, more libertarian leaning. And when I see people so viciously attacking, especially a lot of the more reasonable people who support Trump, that it is sickening, and you just do get tired of it. I mean, there's so much of it. And like you said, there's not a lot of really actually funny anti-Trump stuff out there, although you would think it should be a gold mine of stuff that you could do of just kind of, you know, Saturday night, like old classic Saturday Night Live style. making fun of him. But I don't know. It's as if, just with every single person, the war's on, and they've got to show how progressive they are.
Yeah, I mean, you'd think comedy would be a big weapon in that, and I'll say I'm not a huge Trumpkin either. You can see, look at my Twitter. I mock the right as much as I mock the left.
Yeah.
When I talk about it at all, when it's buried beneath hundreds of cat photos, but
yeah.
But I'm surprised that they've just ceded the weapon of comedy as a useful tool. Like when they do use it, it's like Alec Baldwin on SNL, and it's this joke wouldn't have been funny 10 years ago. Like
well, I mean, SNL has always gone through ups and downs, and in my opinion, they're really in a down right now.
They've been in a down for like 5 years.
Yeah,
everything except the Lonely Island has been in a down.
Yeah, and they don't even do stuff on SNL anymore, do they? I don't know. I don't watch SNL.
They made that pop star movie, but I don't know what else they do.
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to Knives Out, I'll see it probably. Who knows? Hopefully, it is more subtext.
I suspect that Knives Out being what it is like, politics aside, is ultimately a good sign for the film industry. Just like, oh, hey, here's this director that made a $1 billion movie. What do you want to do? I want to make an Agatha Christie movie. I'm like,
yeah.
So I was like, oh, okay. Hollywood seems to be open to letting money-making directors do weird, quirky projects. Like, okay, good thing. That is a good thing in this industry right now, because everything is so homogenized.
Yeah, it is a very good thing. I mean, you even see it when you talk homogenized, say, in the MCU, in the Marvel area. Every once in a while they have a James Gunn or a Taika Waititi, I think is how you pronounce his name.
Yeah.
And one of those people come in and add a little bit of style. That's a good thing. I mean, to see even in these super generic properties.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of going off on your own and doing something Nazi related, have you seen the Jojo Rabbit trailers?
Yes, I have. I don't know what to think about that. That's Taika Waititi is a filmmaker I've been looking at for a while. I mean, have you seen What We Do in the Shadows?
Oh gosh, I love it. I was one of those.
Oh my goodness.
I was introduced to it by a friend who was one of the first people to buy the Blu-ray when it first got distributed in America.
That's awesome.
And he told me go out and buy it. I did. It was expensive, and I'm like, fine, I'll try it, and it was so worth it. It's so great. I think I've watched it more than any other film in the past 3 years.
It's one of my favorite comedies in the last several years. That's for sure.
Good grief, and I'm absolutely in love with it. I can't wait for. I'm excited for JoJo's Rabbit just on how much I love What We Do in the Shadows.
Yeah.
But just looking at the premise of Jojo Rabbit, where it's a kid whose imaginary friend is Hitler, and and they're hiding immigrants in the attic, and I'm like, okay, I can kind of see where you're going with the metaphor of this. It's a little on the nose. But
it's very on the nose.
If you're funny, I will forgive a lot.
Yeah, he has proven to be funny.
I can overlook the fact that They Live is a Marxist masterpiece. It is an amazing movie. So just make it good first, and then we can let the subtext kind of slide by. Yeah,
I mean, who knows? I have noticed it kind of makes me cringe a little bit seeing all the posters and trailers saying it's an anti-hate satire, I think is what it says.
Is that? I didn't even see that. Oh gosh.
Yeah, they say something about anti-hate. They put that everywhere, and I'm just over here thinking, we get it. I mean, if someone is portraying, especially someone like Taika Waititi is portraying Hitler, you don't have to hit us over the head. He's already hitting us over the head with it. You don't have to tell us, oh, it's anti-hate. It's anti-hate. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for it. But what else is coming out this fall that's kind of grabbing your attention?
Let's see.
Well, what comes to mind immediately? Because that's kind of.
Well, Ad Astra, I think, is one that I'm really looking forward to, from director James Gray.
Same.
Who directed Lost City of Z, which is a really good overlooked movie from the past few years.
I actually just watched that last weekend for the first time. I am so mad I missed it.
Yeah, I missed it. I didn't see it in that year. I think I saw it a little later in the next year after that. Yeah, that's a really good one. The kind of movie that you don't see come out of Hollywood, or really any kind of movies anymore. That kind of adventure, H. Rider Haggard style historical fiction slash kind of historical adventure in the jungle and things like that. Yeah, you don't really see any movies like that.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of. When I saw the poster for it, I'm like, oh, this is like a Z grade Indiana Jones ripoff or something like that. And,
not at all. Yeah.
Yeah, it's super smart and cool, and it's a little slow, but now, I'm dying to see Ad Astra 2. I'm going to be reviewing that for Geeks Under Grace.
Yeah. There's also Parasite. I don't know how to pronounce that guy's name, but it's a South Korean director.
He's one of like 3 directors I always mix up because I don't remember the names memorized, but I know who you're talking about.
Then there's The Lighthouse, which is from Robert Eggers. He directed The Witch. Have you ever seen that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are on The Witch.
I saw it once. I need to rewatch it probably before this new one comes out, just to see if I have a better opinion on it. Yeah. But I didn't see it in theaters, so I don't think I really got the prime experience of seeing it. Because at the time, I was a little off-put by the movie was being endorsed by the Satanic Church thing, and
which I don't know if that was actually true, because I think it actually might have been. I think I had either started a thread on Twitter about it or was talking about it on someone else's thread on Twitter, but we were talking about it and someone mentioned that it was endorsed by the Church of Satan, and then the Church of Satan's official Twitter account replied and said, no, it was never endorsed by us.
and maybe it was endorsed by some one Satanist group just as a publicity stunt.
Yeah. Well, of course, Satan is the father of lies, so who knows? Who knows if it's true or not?
Well, there's that.
Yeah, I like that movie a lot. I like The Witch a lot. I know it is pretty divisive among certain kinds of critics. It's pretty much universally loved, but between a lot of people that I interact with on Twitter, it's kind of half and half. People love it or they kind of hate it. It seems it can be off-putting to a lot of people, that's for sure. And I think The Lighthouse is going to double down on that sort of thing. But The Witch I thought was really interesting. Just kind of the ideas of extreme Calvinism that it explored, which is something I'm very much interested in. And then just a more old-fashioned, almost darker kind of American folktale sensibility. That's why I liked it so much. So I'm kind of hoping that The Lighthouse is more of a similar vibe, and that's why I'm looking forward to that one.
My last guest on the show is actually an amateur Calvinist theologian. I'll have to ask her what she thought of the movie. But
yes, I would be very interested to hear. Yeah, I mean, I think it probably mixes different kinds of Calvinism, and it doesn't go really deep into it, as you remember, but just some of the ideas of it.
Well, yeah, I kind of picked up that it was kind of a movie about a negative exploration of Calvinism.
Yeah, definitely negative. Yeah,
a Calvinist family goes off into the woods and replays the plot of The Shining by themselves. So
yeah, I really liked it a lot. I like the psychological aspects of it and just the environmental aspects of it. And I know that this is kind of a argued point as well, but the historical accurate parts of it, there's a lot of research that went into it to get a lot of the historical aspects correct. And a movie doesn't have to be historically accurate. A lot of the movies I love are not historically accurate, but when someone puts as much care as the director of The Witch did, that does impress me, I'll have to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of curious what his play is with The Witch, or not The Witch, with the Lighthouse.
Yeah,
because it's so different. It doesn't seem to be a historical movie at all. It kind of reminds me of Swiss Army Man, which it's just kind of wacky and random. So I'm like, what kind of movie are you going for here? I mean, I kind of get that there's a certain. It reminds me of those A24 films that are just completely weird and just go off and do their own thing and don't actually they have no audience appeal whatsoever. And I'm like,
but then they come out with a trailer that says it's the scariest movie ever made, and then that gets a few butts in the seats.
Yeah,
and then everybody hates it because they thought it was going to be scary like The Conjuring, and it's not like that at all.
Yeah, it's like one of those things where they get this young artist who makes one really good movie. They turn around and they're like, oh, let's hire him to take another movie, and he just goes off on his own and makes something completely incoherent with a huge budget. So
yeah, it's true.
I mean, it's probably gonna be good because he's a good director, but I want to kind of get a sense of what he's doing with that.
Yeah, I am interested. But other movies coming out in the fall that I'm interested in. The two others are specifically The Irishman by Martin Scorsese.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? The trailer, the CGI effects, the de-aging effects didn't look fantastic, but that's just a trailer. People have to remember when they watch trailers that often the effects are not actually finished.
Exactly, yeah.
So we'll see. I mean, Martin Scorsese usually does a really good job when he does decide to use things like CGI. He usually does a great job. So I'm excited about that one.
Yeah, I'm super excited for it and horrifically worried because the one thing I don't like about Martin Scorsese is he has a bad habit of going back to the well too many times.
Yep.
I mean, it's like, yeah. I'm going to redo Goodfellas for the third time now. And I'm like,
yeah.
I mean, like, okay, you did Casino, you did Departed, you did Wolf of Wall Street, which was kind of sort of Goodfellas, but it's also kind of its own thing. And this feels like it's definitely going back to Goodfellas again. I'm like,
Yeah, because when sorry.
It's 4 hours long, too, so...
Hey, I'm okay with that. One of my favorite movies of all time is Gettysburg. Have you...
I've been holding off watching Gettysburg until I finished Killer Angels, so...
Oh, yeah, Killer Angels is great. Are you reading that right now?
No, I tried reading it back in college, and I got horrifically bored and stopped. So I'm going to try again, because I have a bunch of his son, Jeff Sahara's books, too, and I want to read all of them, because it should be right up my alley as a history guy, but the Killer Angels did not work for me the first time, but I was also a bored teenager at the time, so...
I see. Well, I would be interested if you revisited it as a, say, more educated adult.
Yeah, I
think it's a great novel. Yeah, I mean, I would put it in my top favorites for sure. Yeah.
It's an adult book. I can get that.
Well, I mean, it does. I will also confess that I'm really interested in Civil War history specifically, so maybe there's a bias for me toward that. But yeah, I mean, talking about a movie being 4 hours long, I think Gettysburg is over 4 hours long.
Gosh.
So it might be actually more around 4 hours long. I can't remember exactly the runtime, but yeah, I'm not against long movies, but we'll see if The Irishman can actually make effective use of that runtime.
Yeah, I mean, I'm super excited for some of Scorsese's upcoming projects and not excited at all for other ones. Like he's gonna do that Devil in the White City series for Hulu. And I'm like, okay, that sounds super cool. I could kind of see that being, like, super stylized and, like, it could see it as it work as a Scorsese film. And then he says I'm also going to do another boxing movie. And I'm like, oh, gosh. Like, why would you go back to that well?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know.
Raging Bull 2. This time it's personal.
Yeah. He does have that tendency. And the thing that's most frustrating when he does go back to the well, as you're saying, is that when he doesn't do that, when he makes a movie like Silence, or even Bringing Out the Dead, which is kind of a divisive movie, but one that's, I think, really good. He's really interesting and, inventive even, and innovative. But, yeah, he just got to go back to Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci and all those guys, I guess.
I guess that's like his vacations. I don't know. I mean...
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, I feel bad for Netflix for having put $400 million into that movie.
Ooh, because I cannot imagine that movie will make that back. Can you?
Well, it's going to have a tiny theatrical run, and then it's going straight to Netflix. So.
Yeah. Oh, true. Yeah, that's right. It's going to be tiny theatrical.
So it's Netflix is just covering the entire cost, and they're just like, oh, there goes our entire entertainment budget for 2020.
Yeah, their strategy continues to puzzle me. When they first started out, I thought maybe they were just going hard and just using up all their money just to try to get some recognition. But they continue to make sometimes baffling financial decisions.
I mean, I think there's some method to this madness. I know that they're like a multi-billion-dollar company, so if they pour $1 billion a year into new content and they make $8 billion in profit, I can see the magic behind the knowledge behind that. But at the same time, the one thing we do know about Netflix is that the number one thing they make profit off of is reruns of all of old stuff, like Friends and The Office and all that. And they're losing The Office. They have a couple of their shows left. They still have Friends, I think. They have a couple of stuff like that, but when you
Arrested Development, I think, don't they have?
Well, like that's not one of the big ones everyone goes back to. Like
that's true.
Like everyone wants to rewatch Seinfeld and Friends and all of the big sitcoms from the 90s and early 2000s that everyone just kind of that are just easy viewing material.
Yeah, kind of put it on in the background.
They want people want comfortable television. They want to be able to sit down at work and put on Futurama reruns and just let it run all day in the background.
Yeah, and that's okay. I mean, if they want to provide that, that's fine. But
they're not doing that as much though. Like they're losing all their licenses.
Yeah.
Like now Disney Plus is going to be a thing, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to get that. I'm going to let The Simpsons run in the background at work every day, all day, every day.
Yeah, that's interesting. Disney Plus is an interesting one too. Do you follow Red Letter Media?
Of course I do.
Did you see their the Nerd Crew, the Nerd Crew episode they did? Where they're just making fun of all that stuff.
I can't get into the Nerd Crew. I get the whole appeal of Red Letter Media is the fact that they kind of make fun of the fact that they're hacks. But the Nerd Crew is just a bridge too far into self-parody, and I'm like,
Okay.
Like, I get that they really don't like the rest of YouTube, and that they really don't like the whole YouTube critic culture, that they're kind of old school guys that just kind of happen to take up this space. But I don't know. For some reason, I just find that show kind of meh. Let's mercilessly mock everyone. I'm like, normally I'm fine with that, but for this one, it is like, eh.
I understand that, but I don't know. I think the grumpy old man inside of me that's just waiting until I'm old enough for it to come out just loves stuff like that.
I don't know. I just don't want to end up one of those like black-pilled guys that does nothing but watch Turner Classic Movies. I'm like,
they
don't make good movies past 1970.
Yeah, yeah. There are a lot of those guys in our circles, aren't there? And I'm okay with it.
Well, there's that, and then there's Jacob's kind of his own thing entirely. Mm-hmm. Love you, guy. Yeah. You're a cool dude.
Yes, he is. Yeah.
But
I like it because he is. Yeah.
His ears are burning right now, I'm sure, but...
Well, yeah, I mean, I want to see people who are very unique and individualistic, because there is a tendency on both sides of the coin, whether you're talking about the more progressive critics of the blogospheres and Twitter and all that, or you're talking about the more conservative ones. I mean, there's a tendency on both sides to have a just kind of a consensus opinion, even when they shout loudly that there is, that they're not just going with the crowd. It kind of seems like they are. When everybody's kind of saying the same thing, it's a little bit suspicious.
It can be.
Yeah.
But then you get like bombs dropped on the entire film blogosphere, like The Last Jedi, and it just you just watch the lines form, and it's you can't even keep track of where everyone is at all times. It's so intense.
Yeah, The Last Jedi was an interesting one. The Last Jedi was a really interesting thing to happen to geek culture, to happen to, film Twitter, to happen to all those circles where Star Wars is discussed a lot, because when you look back on it, it's almost like for some people, when they saw The Last Jedi, it was like forcing them to, I don't know, it's almost like it forced a lot of people to have to grow up a little bit and to stop being able to just have Star Wars as this, nostalgic thing. It was like it forced them to realize that they would have to have a reckoning with actually having an opinion on things and actually, deciding between things and having a complicated opinion.
I'll say I've never seen a movie bring out so many bad opinions in my entire life. But
yeah, true.
I mean,
that's really true.
On one hand, it brought up the Mahler school of pedantic film analysis, which I kind of despise. Which is, I'm going to do 5-hour analysis of a movie on the internet that's 2 hours long, and individually nitpick every single logical flaw in the movie to prove that it is objectively wrong.
Yeah, and Red Letter Media, talking about them, they kind of got that started.
Well, yeah, but
back in the day.
I mean, there are certainly worse examples out there than them. Although,
yeah, of course.
I don't exactly know why they gave they have a weird opinion on The Last Jedi. Like, I don't entirely understand where they're coming from on it, but
it's just mixed. Yeah.
Yeah, they're like, oh, I have no idea how the heck to process this.
Yeah.
It doesn't fit into anything, and I'm like, but on the other side of that is like you get the snooty progressive critics that are just like, look at all the racists and sexists that stand before me. Bow before my stronger opinions.
Yeah. Well, it really does show up on both sides of the arguments. I mean, there's the people who are like, well, if you hated The Last Jedi, you're racist and sexist and all this. And then people who say if you love The Last Jedi, you're a progressive and a communist. So you can't win. But yeah.
You're literally as bad as Kylo Ren.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I mean, I was really highly positive on that movie when it came out. And then all the discussion came out, and I was trying to understand where a lot of people were coming from. And I finally did kind of understand a lot of the people, especially like longtime Star Wars fans who disliked it. I finally got kind of an understanding of that. And also at one point, my wife told me I was just going to have to stop talking about it. So,
well, I had a recent epiphany on it that kind of crystallized how I think of it. I think the movie was directed specifically for cinephiles, not for pedantic science fiction nerds. Like, there's a certain kind of nerd that in geek culture that wants something that ties in, or every single thing kind of ties into like expanded lore, or they just kind of build this immensely complex world where you can live in. And The Last Jedi wasn't really that. It was an exceptionally small story that cut down the scale of what kind of stories they could tell for the ninth film. And I could see why someone who's like a pedantic Star Wars nerd that's read every single novel would be like, this novel is so wrong about everything. It get the rules of the universe wrong. Yeah. So,
yeah.
So
I think you hit the nail on the head in certain aspects of that. Because when I watched it, you can just see all the references that Rian Johnson is trying to make to samurai films, to westerns, to World War II movies, to just various kinds of, classic films like that. But yeah, as a movie doesn't really respect Star Wars as a whole thing. And I understand people who have made Star Wars their life. I understand why they would be offended by that. It would be like, one of the various movies that have been made about the Bible for us as Christians, say one of those movies like Noah, where it doesn't really have any respect for the text, that, for instance, I hold dear, and that is, although I'm not personally offended by it, is a little offensive to see something like that. So I can understand a little bit where they're coming from, I guess. But I liked it partially because I don't personally have a lot tied up in Star Wars. So maybe that's part of it.
Well, that could be it. I mean, it took me a long time to kind of figure out any sort of dividing lines as to what like kind of schools of thought there were on it. Because initially I thought, oh, it's like a right-left thing, so all the conservatives hate it while the liberals like it. Well, that's not true, because Angry Joe didn't like it, and Six Hexenhammer actually liked it. So I have no idea. I don't really know where the lines are drawn, and it took me a long time. It's like, oh, it's fanboys versus cinephiles. That's it. Like, that's the cleanest approximation I can think of.
And that is generally true. Yeah, that is about as accurate as you could possibly get if you want to boil it down to one sentence.
Yeah. And then there's like normies off in the corner that just go and watch the movie and don't complain.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people loved it. I mean, I remember talking to a lot of people who don't really have an opinion. They're not a fanboy of Star Wars or a cinephile, and they just went to it and kind of enjoyed it, and then that was it. They're not really talking about it anymore, even though we all are still.
Oh, of course.
Which is funny. I mean, it's interesting that we're still talking about it like this. I mean, it's probably going to be like this for a long time, I guess. It's settled down quite a bit, thankfully, but
we're going to be in the nursing homes and we're going to be arguing about this.
Yeah. I mean, unless Disney just keeps on going and going and going with it, and then we look back and say, everybody looks back and says, remember when Star Wars was good, when we had The Last Jedi?
Yeah,
I don't know if that'll happen or not, but it's possible.
We're going to get the Game of Thrones trilogy in 3 years and be like, I remember when Star Wars was good and we got movies like The Last Jedi.
Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting world because nothing is clean cut anymore, much thanks to social media, and whatever opinion you have, you can find a group of people who have your exact same opinion on anything. And that adds to a lot of the divisiveness, I think.
And that's how you get crap like Antifa and the alt-right, so...
Yeah, true, yeah, exactly.
Or furries, equally as damaging to society.
Oh, well, yeah, I think I'll leave that one alone.
Confirmed for furry.
Well, I sometimes watch that YouTube channel, Your Movie Sucks. Have you ever heard of that?
Oh, yeah.
And that guy is a furry.
Is he?
Yeah, he is.
Oh my gosh, I knew he was a degenerate, but no.
Yeah. I actually kind of like his reviews. I know a lot of people find it way too sardonic, but I don't know. I kind of think they're funny, and sometimes it exposes me to movies I wouldn't have seen otherwise.
Yeah, I love his reviews too. He's exceptionally snooty, and I don't agree with him, but I like his opinion.
Yep. Snooty is a good word for it, yeah.
Well, maybe that's...
Yeah.
Maybe that he might give a bad name to snoots. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess we could talk about the Rise of Skywalker, since that's kind of...
Yeah, I mean, when we were originally talking about movies that were coming out this fall, I mean, that was the last one I was going to say.
Okay, yeah. So where do you think that stands at the moment?
Well, has J.J. Abrams ever finished something out well?
No. Well, he's never finished anything.
Yeah. So this will be J.J. Abrams trying to finish out a story. So that will be interesting, and I have a feeling there's a good chance it'll be kind of mediocre. That's kind of what I am afraid of. It looks, the way they're marketing it is they're really trying to appeal back to the original Star Wars fans that hated The Last Jedi. So are they going to just go back on everything that was established in The Last Jedi? Are they just going to change it all, say it wasn't real or wasn't true?
Well, supposedly J.J. Abrams said that Rian Johnson didn't divert the plan that he had originally conceived all that severely. So,
yeah, I did see that, but I don't know how true that is.
Well, yeah. I mean, I know Jacob told me that J.J. Abrams was actually picked Rian Johnson as the Episode 8 director. So,
yeah,
I heard that. I get the sense that whatever that either he's fine with The Last Jedi and likes it, or he's not fine with it and he's living with it because he picked Rian Johnson. So yeah. Either way, what he's probably going to do is kind of find a way to accentuate the ideas he had for Episode 9 and 8 and kind of work them in a different way. My suspicion is that it's going to be roughly on par with The Force Awakens. If not,
that's exactly what I think.
I mean, I really have no idea if it'll be better or worse, but I mean, there's all sorts of rumors coming out of Disney right now from, like, apparently people are, like, leaking story plot points and ideas, and supposedly they have multiple cuts and they're doing they're doing reshoots, but that's, like, normal in Hollywood, so it's...
Of course, yeah.
So it's not really clear as to what the final product is going to be, and we won't know for at least, 2.5 months now, so...
Yeah, it does look a lot like The Force Awakens. They're bringing back Emperor Palpatine, I guess. I'm kind of
fine with that, because these movies have to find a way to kind of carry on the plot from the original, the other two trilogies in some way that makes it cohesive. So I don't mind them doing something where they bring him back to some degree.
Yeah, part of the reason I don't like it is it just feels like if you were to watch, say, the prequels and the original trilogy and then this new trilogy together, dramatic points in the films just don't hold as much weight. Say, if when Vader sacrificed himself and threw Palpatine down that shaft, well, Palpatine's coming back. I mean, I don't really like it when franchises kind of resurrect characters like that, and I know fans like it, but it seems almost lazy in a lot of ways. But I do see what you mean. If they're going to, like The Force Awakens, if they're going to make this trilogy kind of a tribute to the originals, then I guess they might as well go with it.
Well, in some way they have to kind of carry through a through line with the prequels and the original trilogy all the way through here. So yeah. They're juggling a lot of potential story points and a lot of options in terms of how they're going to execute the final film and the 9-film saga.
Yeah.
Which I think that's probably the worst pressure the film has on, is that this film has to resolve like every plot point from 8 previous films.
Yeah, that is a lot of pressure, and very restrictive on any kind of artistry that goes into it, which is part of the problem, I guess. But yeah, we'll see. It might be good. I mean, I'm definitely going to go see it. I know my wife is really excited to see it. She likes both of the previous Star Wars movies, so we'll go see it, and I'll keep an open mind about it. Hopefully it'll be good. I mean, at least we know it'll look good.
Oh yeah, that's kind of a foregone conclusion at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. So you are excited about it?
Oh yeah, I'm all about this. I think people who are fine with The Last Jedi are generally on board with The Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I know there's like people who like Tim Pool who are just absolutely like, I'm never watching anything Star Wars ever again. It has completely ruined it for me. And I'm like,
that's probably over exaggeration. And if it's not, I mean, yeah, that's probably just exaggeration.
Not with Tim Pool. I think I believe him. But
the
other big Star Wars thing at the moment is The Mandalorian.
Yeah.
Which I'm getting Disney Plus on day one just to watch that, of course. So.
Is that coming out immediately with Disney Plus?
Yeah, day one.
Oh wow. Yeah, I haven't really been keeping up as much with the Disney Plus stuff. If I hear that it's good, I'll check it out. And it could be a really good way for, if they're going to continue with Star Wars, to do something that I've wanted to see from the beginning of Disney getting Star Wars, and that is to see them explore similar ideas, but with completely different characters and, different stories and different environments. There's a lot you could do within a popular science fiction franchise that could be exciting and new there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for it too. I mean, I'm curious to see what they're going to do now that they're officially moving on from the Skywalker saga after this year.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Yeah.
What other topics did you have in mind for talking today? I think we kind of exhausted Star Wars.
Well, when I was looking at your articles that you've written, one of the ones that jumped out to me from recently was your article about silence, and kind of tying together Josh Harris leaving the church with a discussion on that movie from Martin Scorsese.
Oh yeah, and that ended up being kind of a crazy piece, because it got cycled around the website I write for, and just about everyone kind of wrote to me as like, "Wow, that was pretty good. Thank you for writing that." I'm like, I don't know how I did that, but thank you.
Yeah, it was really good. I really liked it a lot. I hadn't really made a connection there, but I'm glad you wrote that. Josh Harris, that's his name, right?
Yeah, Joshua Harris, I should say.
Joshua Harris, yeah. His books were a little ridiculous, obviously, and from the point of view of a person with very little life experience. But, it's sad that such a high-profile member of the Christian faith is, quote-unquote, leaving in a way like that. Whether he is a Christian or not, it's obviously between him and God, but it kind of helps show, once again, that we as Christians can't idolize people or elevate them on a pedestal, really. I mean, people, it's kind of just a tendency. You know, we tend to let people down. But back to the movie Silence. I mean, I think you did an excellent job linking those two topics. And every single time I discuss that movie Silence with someone, we always have a fascinating discussion about it. And I think that's reason enough to call it a great film.
I think Silence is one of the best films of this decade. Like, I think people
I agree.
I think people, I see people from every walk of life who watch it and they come away with a different conclusion on it, but it's always an interesting discussion.
Yeah.
I mean, I first heard about it from, I don't know if you've ever read Film Crit Hulk. He's probably my greatest inspiration as a film critic, but he's...
Okay.
Unfortunately, he's been going down the Trump derangement syndrome path for a while now, so... And
That's too bad.
He actually hasn't written anything for the better part of a year now, except for like...
Oh, wow.
But he goes on like long breaks because he's like a film professor out in California, so...
Oh, okay.
So he doesn't really do all that much like writing when he's super busy, but when he does write, his stuff is some of the best film criticism I've read, or it's some of the worst. It really depends on what day it is. Like, especially when he gets into his political hot takes, those are just those are abysmal. Like, I could show you, they are just some of the worst takes I've ever read. But
political hot takes are some of the worst takes in any kind of social media or writing, honestly.
Yeah, I'll have to send you his rape culture article. It is
okay.
The rabbit hole that goes down is so crazy. It is amazing. But
now I have to read it.
Yeah. What causes rape culture? Religion.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
interesting.
It gets pretty deep, but he had a good. But he has an amazing take on silence from the perspective of someone who's not religious.
Okay, so, I would like to read that.
I'll send it to your way afterward, but that was what made me want to go out and see it when I first heard about it. Because just that review is like, oh, it sounds like really interesting, and then I saw it, and I've seen it like 3 times since then, and every time I watch it is spectacular. But
yeah, I mean, not only does it cause a really interesting discussion with, it seems like anyone who watches it, it's also like Scorsese usually does. It's an extremely well-made film, technically. Every aspect of it is just beautiful to look at, but the story itself is pretty grueling to sit through. But at least I found it to be that way. But yeah, I mean, it's a standout film, I think, about the testing of faith, and it has a lot of important questions, and it ponders a lot of important existential questions and ideas. Many that I feel like Christians sometimes refuse to ask, and it's not one of those movies that kind of acts like it's coming up with a revelation that Christians have never discussed before, but we discuss it all the time, like why does God let bad things happen to good people? People sometimes bring that up as a mind-blowing topic, but Christians have been talking about that ever since Christianity began, ever since the beginning. So I like that it gets into a lot of those difficult topics, and it gets into some. I've actually discussed the movie with a few Japanese missionaries that I've known, and they have different opinions on the film itself and even the original book itself. But
really, what did they say?
Oh, well, some of the more conservative ones I've talked to don't like it because it ends with him essentially. The book especially ends, and I think you talked about this in your article.
I've read the book too, so I know I can talk about what happens.
Yeah, I haven't read the whole book. I've only read parts of it, and then to be honest, I read the end of it as well. That's a terrible way to read a book, so don't judge me too harshly about that. But I'll get around to reading it in the complete book one of these days. But yeah, I mean, some of them don't like that. He kind of apostatizes at the end, and a lot of the conservative missionaries that I've talked to are more from the Reformed point of view. That once you're saved, you're always saved. So they feel like it's going against that idea. And then just some parts of it like that. I mean, because I've had people point to missionaries in the past who have died and suffered for the faith and did not deny Christ, and they feel like the story is almost demeaning to them. But I feel like they are kind of missing the point of it a little bit, in that the book, I don't remember the author's name, but Scorsese also in the movie, it's not really, I don't think they're really trying to teach a lesson, at least not through his decision to apostatize at the end. Do you?
I would say it's more of a tragedy, honestly.
Exactly.
It's definitely, ever since I've talked with my Calvinist friends, it's definitely thrown, like, learning about Calvinism and Reformed theology, which a lot of it I've learned in the last month since I've written the piece. Like, a lot of that kind of throws a fascinating wrench into the book and the film, because is he saved from the get-go, given that given what he does prior to repenting? I meant, like, I have a hard time swallowing the Calvinist idea of you are never really saved if you give up at one point. Then
I know what you mean.
It's a hard pill to swallow, especially given the journey that the character goes through prior to him having to do that. I mean, that movie is ultimately about a man breaking down and having the pressure kind of break him.
Yeah, and that's the important thing to focus on in the movie for anyone watching it from a Christian point of view, is that, and especially if I think maybe a lot of people who have said things like that maybe aren't as familiar with Martin Scorsese, the fact that he's Catholic, the fact that he comes from a very Catholic background, and that most of his movies do kind of end in a tragic way, and Silence is no different. I mean, you're not supposed to look at Father Rodriguez. You're not supposed to look at his decision as a good thing. It's a tragic thing, and really, I mean, it's meant to, kind of sadden you when you watch it, I think.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm curious how it plays to someone who's not religious, because I think Film Critic brought up that he read the movie from a secular standpoint as something to the ends of of non-religious morality coming crashing down on religious morality. That being, your individual faith should never trump the lives and well-being of other people, which is a very different take than I think most religious people would walk away from that movie.
Yeah.
But it's like we said, if you're of the more conservative Reformed lot, then the movie is the story of someone who was never really religious showing his true colors, and I don't think that really colors what the movie's about. And
no, I don't agree with that.
Yeah, and especially with, like, I've been intending to write about it before the Joshua Harris situation kind of happened, and it just so happened one day that the two kind of clicked in my head that Joshua Harris leaving the faith is similar to, at least superficially similar to, what happened in the movie. And so I kind of moved that review up a couple months, and that ended up being why I wrote it when I did.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you did. It was a really good exploration of it. I have been in the past wanting to write a more in-depth review of that movie, but I always feel like with your article, I just need to point people to that. It's really good. But yeah, I think once you look at Scorsese and look at his movies as being full of Catholic guilt, that really kind of changes the way you might look at Silence, the way he tells the story especially, and kind of the way he has it ending, the way he changed the ending, and to where you kind of zoom into that funeral pyre at the end, and I don't know what you would call that, basically giant jar that they put him in. I don't know what that's called in Japanese culture, but you see that he's holding a cross. So the implication is that he never actually truly gave up the faith. So
I mean, that's such a weird thing to throw in the movie, and that's definitely the most prescient thing that Scorsese himself added to the text, and it complicates the actual theme of the movie incredibly, especially with the final confrontation. So much happens that makes that's there to make you kind of wonder what's actually happening and what the actual morality of what's happening is going on. You see him staring down. He's being told, abdicate in front of us right now, or 3 people are going to be tortured to death. And he hears the voice of God, who just so happens to have the same voice as his mentor back in Portugal, and
I never noticed that.
Yeah, it's just, you wouldn't know unless you looked at the credits.
Oh wow!
I
did not know that.
It's a weird detail. So God tells him, "Step on my face, I won't be offended. It's helping people." He does it, and then immediately the cock crows, which is the Christian symbol of betrayal. So
Peter.
So yeah, so he's simultaneously betraying God at his own behest, and it's not clear whether the voice he's hearing is or isn't God, or if it's a hallucination, or what it is. Because it's the only moment in the movie where God ceases to be silent long enough to actually talk to the character.
Yeah.
And the result of it is he ends up turning into a Japanese government agent searching for contraband. And Scorsese seems to suggest with the final shot that there's some dignity in being a Christian who doesn't evangelize or doesn't have any sort of external voice of faith, which is a very untraditional opinion, but it's one I sympathize with from the perspective of someone who's not, at least from the perspective of someone who's not the best Christian.
Well, so the way I see all that is simply Scorsese saying that Christians through history have often been put in situations like that. And like the Japanese, many of them decided to go ahead and to be, killed. And the Christians they were essentially willing to die, some of them for the priests. And then it shows the struggle that Father Rodriguez has. And I really think that all he's saying is that that can be a very complicated thing. I don't think he's necessarily trying to get at any kind of doctrine. It doesn't seem to me, especially going through interviews with Scorsese about the movie, that he's really interested in getting at any kind of doctrine with the movie just showing how difficult faith can be and the kind of decisions people are put in sometimes in history. It seems to me also, if you listen to Martin Scorsese, that his greatest respect is really with the people who gave their lives. It seems like his greatest personal respect is not for the main character, but for the people who were willing to sacrifice. But that doesn't all come through in the movie, I don't think, but I don't know.
Well, the movie is so specifically tailored to Rodriguez's perspective.
Yes.
That at times it kind of overpowers any other perspective in the film.
Yeah. If you're coming from it from a Christian perspective, or Catholic perspective like Scorsese is, what is the name of the other missionary who comes with the other priest?
Kylo Ren.
So Kylo Ren,
Father Ren.
He gave up his Sith ways and became a Jesuit priest. I don't know exactly how that happened, but in one way or the other, he was able to do that.
It's a sequel.
No, yeah, it's a sequel. Wow, yeah.
This is Rise of Skywalker is just the bridge between him becoming a Sith and a priest.
Now, if that is true, I would definitely be there for Rise of Skywalker the first day I possibly can be.
Now I just want to see like the Marvel Cinematic Universe thing, but it's just like a linear timeline of all the movies Adam Driver's been in. It's just like the Star Wars trilogy, then Logan Lucky, and then he dies in silence.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Maybe that'll happen. I would be pretty interested. No, but seriously, when he dies in the movie, I think anyone with a Christian or Catholic perspective would look at that and essentially be mournful for him. And I think Scorsese is, but from a non-Christian perspective, that has to play much differently.
Oh yeah, it's like I said from Film Crit Hulk. He said he reads the film essentially as a excoriating the idea of faith in some way, but but he's also a massive atheist, so. It reads very differently to someone who isn't religious.
I actually read a take from it. I think it was from the critic Alonso Duralde. Do you know who that is?
I have not heard.
Kind of a progressive critic. He was with the Young Turks for a while. Anyway,
I was just thinking of the Joker quote. When you're an atheist, silence is a comedy.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's pretty accurate.
I'm sorry, atheists. I love you.
Let's see. His take on it was that he kind of tied it to anybody who is forced to hide who they are. Say gay people throughout history have had to hide who they were, and he kind of that was his take on it. Is that it's really sad, but that kind of mindset and that kind of lifestyle can still endure for people who are truly that way. So that was his take on it, and I thought that was kind of interesting, non-Christian way to look at it.
Sure, that's certainly. I mean, that's probably not what the text implied, but it's
probably not.
That's the thing about complex films, that you can hit them from different angles and you can get different things. So.
Yeah, but it definitely does have the element in it of the endurance of faith, or by extension, anything else really. How even when it's persecuted, there's still a little bit that hangs on. You can never really totally get rid of an idea. Even that may be more subtext, but I do think that's definitely there. But another part of it, you were talking about the ending and how it confuses maybe, say, the themes and message of the movie. What's that?
I was going to say, I don't know if it confuses it as much as it just adds so many layers of themes to it that it.
Okay,
It makes what Scorsese is trying to communicate very strange, and I can definitely see someone who's a conservative or a reformed or anything like that being like, that is not correct.
Yeah. Well, I actually kind of see that ending as Scorsese once again flirting with some Calvinist ideas, because, one of the main ideas for a lot of Calvinists is that, like we were saying earlier, if you're saved, you're always saved. You can't really, you can't lose your soul, essentially. And I wonder if Scorsese was kind of thinking about any sort of Calvinist-like ideas. And I mean, we know that he teamed up with a Calvinist in the past, Paul Schrader, the Taxi Driver. So it could be that he had some sort of Calvinist ideas in mind. I don't know. It seems possible.
Speaking of which, have you seen First Reformed?
Yeah.
What did you think about that?
Well, I loved it. It was one of my favorite movies of last year. What did you think about it?
I remember at the time I said, this would be my favorite movie of the year if it weren't for the fact that it were low-key advocating for suicide bombings against corporations, but it's absolutely spectacular. Although I'm not entirely sure what the theme that he's going for is, but I love the movie.
Well, knowing that Paul Schrader comes from a Calvinist background, I think he was just trying to illustrate kind of the dark night of the soul, and I think that he was just showing kind of I'm not thinking of good ways to put it right now, especially in Calvinist terms, but kind of the persistence of God's grace, essentially. And a lot of that depends on how you read the ending. And I mean, I guess spoilers for that for anybody who hasn't watched it. I do recommend watching First Reformed. Do you mind if I say how I interpret the ending?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say it. If for anyone who's listening, it has one of those legendary, extremely frustrating endings that makes everyone mad and discuss it later. So,
yeah.
Go ahead. We've already spoiled Silence.
Yeah. Although, I mean, I you could spoil it, but that would by no means spoil the experience of watching that movie. So in the end, obviously, you have him. He's going to be a suicide bomber, which is kind of an interesting thing for a Christian to do, because there's no real tradition of Christians being, doing anything like that. But I think Paul Schrader was probably thinking of, Islam when he did that, when he put that in there. But so he's going to
I was gonna
blow
say
himself up.
I was gonna say there isn't a tradition of Christian terrorism unless you're Irish, but
yeah. Well, that's another thing entirely.
Yeah.
I do have a little bit of Irish blood in me. I'm not sure how much, so I guess maybe I tend to overlook that a little bit.
Send the Protestants to the hell they so deserve.
Yeah. Well, anyway.
I should have done that in an Irish accent. If I'd done that in an Irish accent, it would have been funny. I'm sorry.
Yeah, oh, no, that's okay. So then he's going to do it because there's that head of the company. I can't remember the names, but that head of that big corporation who is ruining the environment is in there, and he knows, Ethan Hawke's character knows that he's dying anyway. So he thinks he's going to do this last good deed because he's been infected by radicalization, and he's going to blow himself up, and the church, and the mega church pastor, and the head of this, big factory, and all these, upper crust people in the town. When he sees the woman whose name is Mary, if that's not heavy-handed enough, come in, and so he decides not to go through with it. And then, so he doesn't know what to do. So then he wraps barbed wire around himself. No, he wrapped barbed wire around himself before, didn't he?
No, they did that towards the end.
Yes, okay. So he wraps barbed wire around himself and then pours drain cleaner into a wine glass. And then just before he drinks it, Mary bursts into the room and kisses him. And it's this big, the camera's like circling around them, right? So and then the movie ends. So you don't know what happens. But my take on that is that because no one could get in that door before, he went ahead and drank the drain cleaner and is dying in that moment. And I think that Mary coming in and kissing him is supposed to be the persistence of God's grace. And it's basically God is accepting him, even though he went through a time of not knowing what to think about he didn't even know how to pray to God. He didn't know how to communicate with God. At the end, God is coming in, and even though he has committed suicide, God is taking him in and finally communicating with him, which is still extremely complicated. But I think that's my interpretation of the ending.
That's an interesting idea. I mean, it's not necessarily at odds with the rest of the story, given that she's kind of presented as this like angelic force in the movie. So
yeah,
she is kind of like a force of redemption in the movie in and of herself.
Yeah,
but yeah, that's an interesting take. I'm trying to remember what I thought about the ending. I mean, I just straight up said that the last few minutes are probably his like hallucinations as he's dying. So
yeah, I think a lot of people do think he's dying.
Well, yeah, because he's literally dying of cancer the entire movie. So
yeah,
but at that point in the movie, it's not clear if the cancer has just finally gotten to him, or if he does drink the stuff off screen and die. But
yeah, I don't know. It's definitely ambiguous, and it could be that Paul Schrader just didn't know how to end the movie. I don't want to think that, but it's possible.
No, apparently originally his plan was to use a completely different ending, which is he would just die in bed and like have a graceful death. And
yeah, I heard that. Yeah,
which was going to be an homage to Diary of a Country Priest, which is a film by Robert Bresson.
Right. But, yeah. But then it would have been too obvious of a homage.
Yeah.
I'm glad he didn't do that.
So he went completely out of left field and be like, Calvinist suicide bombers.
Yeah, I don't know. It is a complicated movie, but yeah, I do like it, and especially with my reading of it, it does make me like it even more. I'll have to be honest.
Sure. I recalled midway through our conversation that I actually did a Flawed Faith on it earlier in the year, so I sent that to you as well.
Oh, all right. Yeah, I'll read that.
That's the thing about me is I write something and then it just kind of falls to the wayside and I never think about it again.
Yeah, I know what you mean, yeah.
So someday someone's going to be like, what was your thought when you were writing your silence article? And I was like, I don't remember.
Did I write an article about silence? What's silence?
Exactly. But right now I'm writing something that's kind of a mirror image to the silence article. I'm writing about Iron Man, and I'm calling him, which I'm kind of building off the idea that he's kind of a representation of modernity, and exploring how that is explored in his films. So I'm hoping that actually turns into something pretty good, but I've been working on it on and off for a week now.
Oh yeah, that could be really good. Yeah, I kind of agree with that take. I don't think the people who made the MCU necessarily were maybe thinking of that, but there's definitely a good parallel to be drawn there.
Oh, I think he's definitely, well, he's literally coded like he's like Elon Musk and all these like cool tech billionaires, and he's given all these like emblem. He's given all these like what's the word? Symbols of like modern wealth and prowess, being like he's a ladies man, a playboy, he's rich, he's intelligent, like he's every marker that we hold in high esteem nowadays. So I'm making the case in the article that he is the best case for post-Christian modernity, and exploring where that goes, especially in the context that he turns into a god and dies in the last movie.
Yeah, if that's not heavy-handed enough for you.
Yeah.
That could be a really interesting article. I can't wait to read that. That would be really interesting.
And I'm front-loading it with a discussion about how atheism has failed us, so I'm expecting nothing but positive opinions and happy tweets and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, you should get I can only imagine positive reactions to that. There's nothing divisive about anything you just said. Not at all. No, that there's a lot of good discussion that could be had there. Hopefully it fosters some good discussion. I can't wait to read that.
Unfortunately, I've been so busy the past week I haven't had time to sit down and do anything on it.
Yeah, I absolutely know what you mean. Yeah, I'm trying to write an article right now. I have been for a while now. I've been wanting to write a huge article about Westerns, like the American West genre.
Okay, yeah.
And because that's something, that was kind of my first love as a little kid of movies at all. Kind of the thing that got me into movies is Westerns, watching them with my grandpa and stuff. And I recently published, I don't know if you've read it, but another guy I know just from Twitter, his Twitter handle is Master of One Inch Punch.
Yeah, he also writes for Ed, so.
Yeah. He wrote an article that I published. It was kind of an older article that we kind of cleaned up and about Hong Kong movies. And it was always kind of like a big primer about Hong Kong cinema. And so I'm wanting to write something kind of like that about Westerns. So, but I've had, like you're saying, I've had trouble getting to actually be able to write for it.
Yeah, I've actually got Ed up at the moment on my other computer while we're talking, so I can see it. Well, yeah. So, question: what was the logic behind doing a review for The Man Who Killed Hitler and Then Bigfoot?
The logic behind doing it? Well, I was sick, and I had a fever.
Delusion is usually a good excuse. I like that.
Yeah, delusion. No, so I saw it on Hulu while I was sick and watched it, and really enjoyed myself watching it, and so I wrote a review on it, and that's all there is to it.
I think I skimmed through it, and I don't remember what the actual takeaway was from that, but
it's on Letterboxd, I think I gave it a 3.5 out of 5.
That's not bad.
So, yeah, I liked it a lot. So it's pretty much a B movie that takes itself very seriously with Sam Elliott. So I'm a huge Sam Elliott fan, so that's a lot of my reason behind liking it. It's essentially like a celebration of B movies and Sam Elliott and World War II veterans. So it's pretty weird, but it's on Hulu, so if you have Hulu, it's worth a watch.
That is a heck of a combination of things.
Yeah, it's weird, for sure. And I liked it a lot. I had a lot of fun watching it. I mean, if you can get past the fact that they're taking a movie about killing Hitler and killing Bigfoot seriously, if you can get past that, then I think you could enjoy it. But I mean, if you have Hulu, it's free there to watch. I mean, you might as well.
All right. I think both of us have to be out of here in about 20 minutes. So did you want?
Yeah.
What else do we have? What else did you want to talk about?
I mean, that was kind of the main things that I had in mind. Yeah, not much else. I really like that you mentioned Annihilation the other day as basically an alternative to It 2. It
Oh
Chapter
yeah,
2.
yeah. I mean, I was thinking that while I was watching it. I'm like, I could just watch Annihilation and get my Lovecraftian horror movie in 2 hours
Exactly.
instead of 5.
Yeah, that was a long movie. I think I thought it was painfully mediocre as a movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you want a few similar themes and a much better movie, then yeah, watch Annihilation. I like that you drew that comparison.
I bet it's even just the concept reminded me of it. It's an alien creature comes to Earth, and it's a Lovecraftian abomination that humans can't comprehend, and things ensue as a result of that. I'm like, okay, the Annihilation is the better version of that premise, and it just drags on indefinitely and gets incredibly silly. So
yeah, I didn't like It Chapter 2 that much. I did like the first one. I know there are several people I talked to on Twitter who didn't really like the first one either. I thought the first one was kind of fun. I didn't think it was scary or really that creepy or really that good if you looked at it as just a coming-of-age movie. But I kind of looked at the first one as a fantasy action adventure more. And in that vein, I thought it was enjoyable, but not the second one.
Honestly, I'd probably just rather watch Monster Squad again.
There you go. Another good alternative.
Yeah, the lovely 1980s Shane Black written kids on bicycle genre movie. I don't
really remember that. I'll have to revisit that.
It's not a great movie, but it's kind of like Universal Monster movie Avengers. But
okay.
On its own terms, it's fine as a kids movie. I mean, I know some people pitched it to me as like they made a movie with all of the Universal Monster movies in it. It's like the Avengers, but with monsters. I'm like, okay, I'll watch it. And I'm like, oh, it's basically just a cheaper Goonies.
Yeah, I mean, for something more modern, I mean, I think I would rather watch Stranger Things again rather than watch even the first It movie and the second one.
It is clearly ripping off. So
yeah, which I mean, it's funny because the novel obviously was a huge inspiration for Stranger Things, but that's the way it kind of works.
Of course it is. I mean, the first It movie was fine to me, but it really didn't do anything special to warrant anything like enormous, because I know so many people that just absolutely loved it and then forgot about it for 2 years and then like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna go back and watch the new one. But
that's one of those things that has a lot of mainstream and crossover appeal.
I'll tell you this, I have no desire to go back and read the book now. I've never read it, but
it's a gigantic mess. It's huge. I mean, you could use it as your desk.
I have no tolerance for that sort of thing. Like, if I'm gonna dedicate a year, 3 months of my life to reading a book, it has to be worth it.
Yeah.
I'm like,
well,
I read Don Quixote over 3 months. I'm like, oh, that was a good book. I'm glad I did that. And then,
but that's a classic piece of literature that is good to read. I mean, you know, it's that's a good one because so many pieces of art have referenced.
Yeah, and I absolutely refuse to read the Game of Thrones novels because I'm like, I don't want to dedicate my life to this nonsense.
Yeah, I haven't read much. I read a little bit of the first one of the Game of Thrones novels, and I haven't read any of the rest of them. It's just a little there's just too much there for me to get into, and it was impressive, the worlds that George R.R. Martin builds, but there's nothing about his prose that made me want to come back to it. So yeah, but the novel, I mean, it's huge, and it's basically all you need to know is that Stephen King plus cocaine equals It.
Yeah, that's the joke that's going around.
Yeah, that's a pretty good meme.
I just don't take Stephen King movies all that seriously as much as I used to. Like, there's such a prestige around his name, but then you realize that he signs off on like absolutely abysmal adaptations of his movies and then hates the good ones. And I'm like, oh, whatever.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy, and he's like you were saying earlier with Trump derangement syndrome. He's kind of a victim of that ailment. But Stephen King I mean, I actually recently read his book on writing. I think it's literally called On Writing.
I have a copy of it behind me that I was forced to buy in college and never read.
Well, the thing is, for the writing stuff in it, you might as well read Strunk and White. You know, the Elements of Style, I think it's called.
Yeah, I also have that.
Which is a tiny book, and just anybody trying to get into writing, I mean, that would be the first thing I'd recommend to them. And Stephen King, in his book on writing, basically for most of his stuff where he's talking about the actual technical parts of writing, references the Elements of Style a lot. But I kind of found interesting a lot of the memoir stuff that he included in that book, because when you read that, he just seems completely unpretentious, and he seems to be very aware of what he is as a writer. Because there are a lot of people for whom Stephen King is their favorite author, but he's not really that good of a writer. You know what I mean?
He
Hopefully that doesn't make anybody upset.
No, I'm not a huge. I don't think I've actually read any of his books beginning to end, but I could see why someone would like absolutely love him or someone would absolutely hate him.
Yeah.
I mean,
but he's good at writing that kind of pulpy kind of stories. I mean, he's good at that, and he's kind of he was at one time efficient at doing that, and that's how I look at it.
I mean, no one writes as fast as he does. He writes like an old school pulp guy that has to write 50 pages a day in order to get all of his quotas done.
Yeah, and if you read that book on writing, that's kind of how he views himself.
I mean, that's good that doesn't take himself all that seriously, but
yeah,
I don't know. I every time I see one of his books at the store, it's 800 pages long, and it's like, why would I ever want to read that? Like,
yeah, there are only a few of his that are worth reading for that kind of commitment.
And I'm always worried about the movies too, because they end up all over the place in terms of quality. Like
sure.
I'm super interested in Doctor Sleep, but I have no idea how that's going to turn out.
I'm afraid that it won't be a very good. I think it'll be another one of these kind of mediocre movies. I don't know. I haven't read the novel that Stephen King wrote, but I know that a lot of Stephen King's later writing is worse than his earlier writing. So I don't really want to make, like you're saying, that commitment to read that huge book. And I mean, I think it's Mike Flanagan directing this movie. He's a good horror director.
I'll give it two things in its favor. One is Mike Flanagan, who's done two adaptations. One was I think Gerald's Game, and then he also did House on the Haunted Hill for Netflix. And both of those have like universally good reviews. So I'd say that's the good thing. And I'd also say the other good sign that's coming out of it is that it got bumped up from January to November.
That is a good sign.
So they said like, oh, we could actually sell this next to Terminator and what else is coming out early? This will be great counter programming to Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood.
Yeah. Oh, that's another movie I'm looking forward to. Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood.
I'm so excited for that, but I'm pretty sure it's only going to be mediocre.
Yeah, I mean, is it Disney making it?
I think it's Sony actually.
Oh, okay. Because when I watched the trailer, I got Saving Mr. Banks vibes.
I actually got End of the Tour vibes. I don't know if you've seen that.
Oh, I don't think I've ever seen that.
It's a End of the Tour it was an independent comedy from the guy who made The Spectacular Now about David Foster Wallace, the author, who was.
Oh.
So I assume you know who that is.
Yeah.
So the lead performance by Jason Segel was absolutely spectacular. But the movie was absolutely watered down by the fact that the other main character was this self-insert character who was clearly just some regular guy who wanted to have like a dialogue with this famous author. So it just turns into this pretentious fest of incredibly talented author being done by an incredible lead performance, having a dialogue with the director, and it's super self-serious, and the character that they come up with to talk with the author is not very interesting. And I kind of got vibes. I kind of got vibes from that from Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, especially when they see that it's like it's not about Mr. Rogers. It's about a reporter doing a report on Mr. Rogers, and he's like, and you just see in the trailer being like, "You are helping me overcome something." I'm like, why is this in the movie about Mr. Rogers?
Yeah, that makes me a little fearful for it. I really liked that documentary that came out last year about Mr. Rogers. I actually, which some people could see as a bad thing, but I actually listed that as my favorite film of that year, of last year.
That was my favorite film for most of last year, so I completely sympathize.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Rogers, I did watch him a little bit when I was a kid, mostly just at my grandparents' house. But although there are some elements of his personality that I wouldn't necessarily try to emulate, there is a lot about his kindness that really inspires me. And I hope they do that well in the movie. I'm also afraid in the movie that they're going to erase a lot of the very Christian parts of him that were very much driving him as an ordained minister, right?
Yeah, that's true. That I hadn't even thought of that. That's true. They haven't brought any of that up. So
I hope it's in the movie, but I'm afraid it won't be.
This is gonna be a whitewashed, watered down Mr. Rogers. That's gonna friggin' sick.
Yeah, because if you remove a lot of those elements about Mr. Rogers, like the part that later in life he was, sad that he felt like he hadn't really kind of enacted the change that he hoped he would, and the part that his Christian faith was the main thing that drove him. I mean, I don't really know what's left interesting except he was a nice guy.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to make a story about how you make better people in the world, and you take out the thing that defined him most as a human being, you're missing every point that you could possibly make with that movie.
Yeah, it's just like, although not really a one-to-one comparison, but if you've ever seen that kind of mediocre movie Walk the Line about Johnny Cash, and basically the whole movie they're talking about his drug addictions. And if you listen to anything, read anything from the real Johnny Cash, when he got over his drug addiction, his faith was a major part of him actually being able to recover and actually be able to stop, doing drugs and being a drunkard. But in the movie, they pretty much totally erase that, and it just makes it completely ineffective in that part of the story.
Oh, lovely. I think there was another movie that kind of did that too, but I can't remember what it was.
Yeah.
That just seems to be the kind of thing with Hollywood movies. They don't want to go into the religious aspects at all. So.
Yep. Yeah. Well, that's the way it goes.
Do we want to end on a happy note?
Sure. Yeah.
What do you got?
Well, I mean,
do better.
I would. Man, I hope you cut out some of my stuttering here. Yeah,
I refuse on principle.
Okay. Well, I would say any. I don't know why I'm totally drawing a blank here. I just got on my phone just popped up a message from my work, so that kind of distracted me for a second.
That's okay. This is a duct tape operation. We aren't going for professionalism.
Okay, that's good to hear. Very, very good to hear. Very promising. Yeah, I mean, I would say that I looking through your stuff, I really like what you're doing. You're a conservative leaning critic who is, you're not hiding who you are, and I like that. I like that a lot. But at the same time, to me, you seem really balanced and reasoned. You're not going crazy, and it seems like there's so much divisiveness these days that we really need some conservative and libertarian leaning critics who are more balanced. And for anybody out there who wants to write about film or culture, I would just encourage them to try to have more of a settled mind about things. It seems like we're more divided than we've ever been right now, but that's not really necessarily the case if you look at history. So I don't think we have to despair. And the reason I was thinking of this was Mr. Rogers. His policy was to be kind to people. And I really do think sometimes people think if you're kind to people, you can't be avid about your worldview and you can't fight for your rights. But you can. I mean, history has proven that we can do that and that we can overcome divisiveness in our country. So if you're looking to be commenting on culture and films and things like that, I would just encourage you to try to see things in a more balanced light.
You say I appreciate the compliment, but you said I've already seeded this podcast with enough controversial interviews that if someone tried to do the Jared Holt hit piece on me, I'd probably be screwed.
Well, yeah, that could happen to just about any of us.
I mean, have you looked at the guests I've had on?
Yeah.
I had.
Well, I wouldn't.
I had Devin Ferrasi on. If anyone ever tries to come after me, I'm so screwed.
Well, that's okay.
Let alone Rachel Fulton Brown. Like, I don't know if you've heard of her, but she's one of the Milo acolytes. And if anyone ever realized who she was,
yeah. But I mean, if anybody looked at it in the context of the reviews you do and the articles you do, see, that's the thing that's lacking in this, like, you know, in Twitter and this kind of instant hit and hot take culture, is that we just totally ignore context. I mean, we ought to be able to talk to people who are controversial and still, you know, have a balanced and reasonable and kind view on things, but everybody just wants to do hit pieces and take you down, you know?
I know, but that's the thing. No one's going to. Like, when I get my Right Wing Watch hit piece 10 years from now, when I'm finally being paid to write, it's going to say, infamous alt-right film critic Tyler is well known for associating with rapists and alt-writers like Professor Fulton Brown of the University of Chicago.
Yeah. Oh, well. You just got to keep doing what you're doing.
I mean, that's a bittersweet note to end on, but I do appreciate the compliment. Do you want to plug all your stuff real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like we were talking about earlier, I write with a friend of mine, David Malone, at Ed Music Movies, etc. That's at theedblog.com. So it's just theedblog.com. Probably get a lot of hits from weird things about that, but you know, it's supposed to be a joke. So, and then I write at Letterboxd and listened.com and on Twitter under a heavy metal pin, all one word.
All right, great. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It was great talking to you.
Sure thing. We'll have to do it again sometime.
Absolutely. Sounds good.
All right. Have a good night. Or have a good day. It's only 11:30 on this end.
Yeah, same here. You too.